It hit the 37-story building?
Explosions are thundering in the apartments of high-rise buildings. Doors have been blown off, windows shattered, and blast waves have destroyed the walls.
It crashed right under the building.
Muscovites are in a panic. Drones are attacking. Air defense missiles are hitting their own targets.
And there are a vast multitude of them. They're soaring through the air, as it certainly appears to be.
It crashed right under the building. And that's the bedroom there. Over there, too.
What was damaged?
On the 28th day of the month.
The AFU are attacking the CHP plant, the Moscow region, the Ryazan oil refinery, and the Dyagilevo airfield.
Oh, look how everything is burning.
It's a total nightmare. It's all going up.
The oil refinery.
In the Moscow region, Muscovites are trembling. Missiles and drones are flying into their homes. Russia is plunging into blackouts, a fuel crisis, and railway chaos.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I will come over right now. Yes.
CHP plants, airfields, and logistics have been blown up.
That is absolutely unbelievable.
This situation is absolutely, completely another.
Explosions in Moscow and the Moscow region. Skyscrapers have been attacked. Drones are crashing into high-rise buildings.
One hit a 37-story building.
Destroyed walls, shattered windows, explosions. Moscow. The Moscow region is being attacked by Ukrainian drones.
This is absolutely and completely messed up, beyond belief.
Holy shit, damn.
Clumsy Russian air defense is hitting residential buildings in Moscow and the Moscow region.
The drone took off.
The governor of the Moscow region is furious. The blast wave destroyed walls and cars.
It wrecked everything, just tore everything apart, the whole entrance.
The regional governor, furious, claims that there have been a series of powerful strikes in the Moscow region. Ukrainian missiles and drones are attacking Moscow. An explosion went off in an apartment in a high-rise building in Krasnogorsk near Moscow. Part of the wall was simply blown out by the blast waves. Windows were shattered in at least 5 apartments. According to media reports, a powerful explosion occurred in apartments on the 13th and 23rd floors on Cosmonauts Boulevard. Glass and pieces of the building's facade are scattered all over the courtyard. For the first time in a long while, Moscow and the Moscow region are under attack from Ukrainian drones and missiles. Meanwhile, Russian air defense is hitting residential buildings while shooting down Ukrainian drones and missiles. The courtyard on Cosmonauts Boulevard is littered with drone and missile debris, shards of glass, and part of the wall was blown out by the blast wave. Several cars have been damaged. President Zelenskyy has announced strikes deep into Russian territory, up to 3,000 kilometers. Moscow, St. Petersburg, the Moscow region, and the Leningrad region are now under constant and ongoing strikes. A series of blackouts is happening because we are attacking power plants in the Moscow region and slowly plunging Russia into darkness. In Belgorod and the Bryansk region, there are blackouts. No electricity, no heat, and no water. Freeze, freeze, wolf's tail, a saying of Putin's that is now becoming a reality for Russia. Strikes on power plants in Smolensk, Belgorod, and Kursk. Strikes on power plants in the Moscow region. High-rise buildings and skyscrapers burning in the center of Moscow and in the Moscow suburbs. Railway hubs have been attacked, and air traffic is being disrupted. Strikes by ATACs, Storm Shadow, Ukrainian missiles and drones on Russian territory, as well as President Trump's sanctions and the Russian economy, which is heading into the abyss. We will discuss all of this with the well-known political strategist, Mikhail Scheitelman.
Hello, Gotcha. Well, of course, St. Petersburg being without power is not our doing. The Russians themselves turned it off. It wasn't us who knocked it out. Now they're shutting off both electricity and communications there, fearing our strikes. But of course, truly, we can say glory to the heroes, because these latest strikes are getting stronger and stronger. Remember how they threatened us that they used to threaten us that 500 drones a day would be coming at us, but now it's 500 drones a day hitting Russia. This has actually become a reality now. We know for sure that the daily production of drones in Ukraine is measured in the hundreds. And right now, I'm not talking about FPV drones, but specifically large, long-range drones for deep strikes. Just look at what happened in a single day. A thermal power plant in Belgorod was destroyed by missiles. Not by drones, but by missiles. For the 3rd time in a row, drones have struck Lukoil's oil platform. In the Caspian Sea, it was hit by drones. And this gas processing plant in Astrakhan Today, the Yaroslavl oil refinery, which was hit 3 days ago, has stopped operating. It simply ceased its activities. Well, the strikes on Moscow, let's be honest, are ineffective for now. That's just how it is. There's nothing that can be done. In fact, many of our servicemen admit that without ballistic missiles, we are currently unable to break through to Moscow because their air defense has been reinforced. But these strikes are necessary because, firstly, so that the Russians can't use this air defense elsewhere, and secondly, at the very least, we are disrupting the operation of airports. This shows that, in general, no one should believe Trump when he says that Ukraine will lose anyway. That's simply not true. It's a complete lie. And now it might very well turn out that, now Trump will start complaining, how can you fire at submarines? Remember when we hit the airplanes? During Operation Web, Trump said, how could this happen? Ukraine is not to blame for anything, and yet the parked airplanes were destroyed. How could that be? But the operation was phenomenal. Could we have even dreamed of this at the start of the war? Well, no one could have dreamed of this at all. This shows that in modern warfare, Ukraine is simply much smarter, more cunning, and more flexible than this clumsy Russia with its huge World War II era hunks of metal. The only thing I can agree with you on is when you say that the Kremlin will declare the negotiations over. They will never say that the negotiations are over. If the negotiations are over, then they will be the blame. The Russians will be the ones at fault. They're not ready for that either, and they don't intend to take on that kind of responsibility. They'll say that, of course, negotiations will continue and all that, just to drag things out and buy time, while continuing the war, of course. When we're told that it's enough just to withdraw from Donetsk region, that's not true either. Putin said it directly, out loud, that the Ukrainian army must withdraw from all the positions it holds. From all of them. He said this in his speech in Kyrgyzstan. No, he didn't say that. In Donetsk region? And then he clarified in another speech that they need to withdraw from Novorossiya as well. And we saw Gerasimov's map of Novorossiya. It includes Odessa, Zaporizhia, Kherson. That's where the Ukrainian army is supposed to withdraw from, according to Putin. But I really think that this isn't a dead end. People say that when we were heading somewhere, it seemed like we were getting close, but then we ended up in a dead end. But we weren't actually getting close to any resolution. This war wouldn't have started if it could be ended so easily. If this war had any goals other than imperial ones, then it would be possible to discuss everything. The goal of the Russians is the destruction of Ukraine, the destruction of the Ukrainian people as such. They don't deny this. Moreover, they emphasize it. Putin himself, in that same Kyrgyz speech, said, "We will fight until the last Ukrainian." In other words, he said he wants to kill every Ukrainian. Previously, it was Medvedev who said this. Now it's Putin saying it. And how can they achieve this peacefully? Well, only if Ukrainians agree themselves, but it's clear that Ukrainians themselves will not agree. When you ask, where is the way out? The way out is not at the negotiating table. It's in what Trump is doing. There are two components. The negotiating table, that's what we see. He is really putting pressure on Ukraine, definitely, one way or another. But he's also putting pressure on Russia. He imposed a sanction, he imposed it. And then Lukoil. Yes.
Even back then, a long time ago, he already imposed it, a long time ago.
2 months ago. But they only came into effect in November. These sanctions came into effect in November, just a month ago. But very little is written about this, very rarely and cautiously, but sometimes it does slip into the press. And for some reason, this is just my personal opinion, formed purely from my own subjective observations of reality. For some reason, it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that all these strikes of ours, or at least many of them, I'm not talking about the submarine now, no, those were separate, would have been impossible without their support. America. That is, our strikes on oil refineries, our strikes on platforms in the Caspian Sea, on specific vessels. In the Caspian Sea, which we hit last week, on the Rachmaninoff, which was transporting weapons from Iran to Russia. Definitely on the Caspian Pipeline Consortium and so on. On the oil ports of Novorossiysk and Tuaxi would have been impossible without the Americas. On tankers near the Turkish coast. We haven't heard a single word from Trump against it. That is, when we targeted the planes, he spoke out against it. But when we hit the oil, he stays silent, which means he's in favor. Biden was against it. Austin was against it. They spoke out directly. Trump is not against it at all. Most likely, we are being provided with intelligence for this, because it would be very difficult to carry out such large-scale operations without American intelligence data. The Europeans, who are essentially funding the creation of these drones, are also not against it. So no one is against it. This is what is called military dare. They don't say this out loud. Trump doesn't say, I'm still going to put military pressure on Putin, but he is employing it through us. And this whole range of factors taken together is what could lead to the end of the war. Obviously not to peace. Let's be honest. Peace is still a long way off for us, as far as the moon, and there's not even a hint of it yet. We're only talking about a ceasefire, not a Christmas truce, but a ceasefire. That's what Trump is trying to achieve, a ceasefire. And for Putin to agree, yes, the terms are clear, along the current front line. This is already a compromise that Ukraine has agreed to make, a ceasefire along the front line. Now they're expecting the same from the Russians. And that's why the pressure will continue. When we destroyed 2 piers of the Caspian Tramway Consortium, which are located in Kazakhstan and through which Kazakh oil is transported, neither the Europeans nor the Americans said a word to us. When we started targeting tankers somewhere out there in neutral waters, neither the Americans nor the Europeans said a word to us. To me, this means that, of course, everything is being coordinated.
Well, here's the news from Bild. The Kremlin is preparing in advance to reject the peace plan being discussed in Berlin. While negotiators in Germany are talking about being close to a compromise on the war in Ukraine, analysts are paying attention to sharp statements from the Kremlin, which look like a pre-prepared no to any possible peace plan. That's all, says Ushakov. He makes it clear that Moscow does not intend to give in, not even a step. According to him, the Kremlin has already laid out its position. If Kiev and the EU make any changes to the peace plan, Russia will respond with strong objections. That's exactly what everyone is discussing right now. Mikhail, what do you think?
Yes, that's right. Yesterday, it was very noticeable. It really stood out. Their statements were made in advance, several by Ushakov. There was also someone from Peskov's side. I can't recall all the numbers right now. The quotes are verbatim. But the main point was exactly that. No, we already disagree in advance. You're writing something there, but we already disagree. And by doing this, they also want to ease the pressure on themselves. Because just imagine, today the Europeans, together with the Americans, are coordinating something with us. So this whole meeting in Berlin, what happened next? Yes, it was said that they should talk to the Brussels Summit of Foreign Ministers, and today they're doing it online. Either they've already talked or they still will. I don't know. But in fact, it was the Europeans who summoned them, called them in to give an account. What are you gathering there for? To make proposals to Putin? We need to know about this, because either we'll support it or we won't support what you're proposing at all. That's one. Second, this evening, actually right now, by the way, as we're speaking, this is happening in this format. A European leader, by the way, Tusk definitely flew in, I know that for sure. Zelenskyy, Schultz, someone else, I don't know exactly who from the European world is present there right now. And Witkoff Kusner. So before they go to Moscow again without the so-called European backing, they won't be able to push through any plan. And the Russians understand. That's why the Russians were so afraid that Witkoff and Kushner would talk to us. And so let's say they will fly again. By then, the Russians will look like people who have come to you several times already. What do you mean? We spent a lot of time on you. We've flown to see you. That's why they don't even want this visit. This visit is just not convenient for them. So what? They'll come to us again with some plan that doesn't suit them? And so it turns out they are not showing any flexibility. That's why, yes, that's why they're kind of laying the groundwork in advance, saying like, we don't really want.
This unexpected and very pleasant visit of yours. Anyway, it is truly wonderful to see you here today. He believes this is progress and that we won't repeat the mistakes of Minsk. That's a quote. Mikhail, what do you think now at the end, when, so to speak, the negotiations are over and there's some kind of track, who will Trump blame? Because just 2 days ago, over the weekend, he was saying that it's Zelenskyy. He's the only one who doesn't want it. So now, who will be the one who doesn't want it?
Yes, that's a question I don't have an answer to. I'll say that right away. I usually have answers, but this time I don't. Because on the very same day you mentioned, when he criticized Zelensky, his press secretary, Ms. Leavitt, came out and said that Trump is dissatisfied with both sides because it was literally on the same day, in the very same situation. By the way, when he criticized Zelensky, what did Trump mean, as far as I understood? God, it's not so easy to figure out. He didn't say that Putin wasn't to blame and that Zelensky was. He meant something else, that out of all Ukrainians, only Zelensky is against it. Like the rest of the delegation is in favor. With whom? The rest, I don't know. I'm not familiar with them. But Zelensky is like a child. Everyone in Ukraine is in favor. Just look, 82% supported. And the politicians are for this Asian approach. He wasn't exactly setting up Putin as Zelensky's opponent. So I think he'll end up blaming everyone: Zelensky, Putin, and Ukraine. Here, Russia is already trying to sow division from within to destabilize, so to speak, Ukraine and the Ukrainian position. Well, that's why I think that when it happens again, he'll have to take a step back, as he always likes to do. And by the way, today is the 15th, and this is Christmas. Whether it's a truce or not, I don't know. But Christmas is definitely a time when nothing works in America and nothing can get done. So 2 weeks ago, when we were under a lot of pressure, the pressure was probably at its highest. I think we've already passed the peak of pressure on Ukraine. When our delegation was basically being held hostage in America and a private country club, what do you call it? A golf club owned by Pitkoff. And they demanded that we sign right there on the spot. You remember that was the situation. It wasn't made public at first, but then it was revealed that they were demanding signatures right there on the spot to sign something over the phone.
Backdrop of the corruption scandal and the firing of Yarmak Medichke. What was going on?
So they said, let's have you sign right now and let Zelensky confirm it over the phone. But we've already been through all that. We've just sailed right past it somewhere. At that time, I said we needed to hold out for 3 weeks. Then Christmas will come and everyone will forget everything. And as if after Christmas, the whole story will start over from the beginning. All of this will be set aside, all these 28 points. And we'll sit down, so to speak, with a clean slate. So in this sense, we just need to hold out for another week to not give in to American pressure. And also, once again, look, here's some interesting statistics. Here, since there are agencies, let's say, that I think are recognized in Ukraine, respected ones, which you can rely on. The rating agency, the KIS agency, and a few others you could name, which can be trusted because throughout all the history I've observed in Ukrainian political life, their forecasts have come true. Well, not forecasts, they didn't make forecasts, but rather conducted polls. And then when you look at the actual elections, that's exactly how it turns out. Plus, they track all the dynamics, meaning they conduct these polls regularly, and you can see how the numbers change. And there was a very interesting study from Keys today, which I'll come back to again. They conducted the study over the course of 3 weeks. From November 26th to December 13th, they conducted the surveys. And accordingly, different people answered the same question on different days. And they divided them into 3 groups, specifically based on those who answered earlier, in the middle, and at the end. So what did they find? So the level of trust in Zelensky in October, late September, early October, was 60%. That's the baseline, 60%. Now, when they published their survey, it was 61%. So basically, you could say the level of trust in Zelensky hasn't changed. But that's only how it seems, because they looked at it week by week by week. In the last week of November, the level of trust in Zelensky was 49%. So it dropped sharply from 60 to 49, because at that point, there was already the effect of the corruption scandal around Energoatom. All of this naturally hit Zelensky's ratings, including the dismissal of Yermak and so on. I don't even remember if Yermak had already been dismissed by then. Probably he had. But it was a blow after the corruption scandal. And Zelensky lost 11% of trust, which makes sense. But then, the following week, trust was already at 61%. And the most recent week, which is now, it's already at 65%. What? It's Trump. That is, Trump, by putting pressure on Zelensky, Ukrainians perceive it as pressure on Ukraine. And as a result, Trump himself keeps raising Zelensky's ratings with his actions. It was the same in the spring. Exactly the same thing. In the spring, Zelensky had 54% trust. Then Trump came along and it went up to 75. You see? because he kicked him out of the White House, because he made demands and so on. If Zelensky needed a political strategist, Donald Trump would be the best one. It's as if he's doing it on purpose. You couldn't make this up if you tried. In any critical situation for Zelensky's ratings, Trump appears and boosts them. And he did it in just 2 weeks. That's what they're counting on. Look, yes, I think this is the Americans' mistake in the negotiations. They think that Zelensky is weak right now, so they'll put pressure on him. And he'll agree. But the exact opposite effect happens. They put pressure on Zelensky, and he stops being weak because everyone is like, oh, so you're putting pressure on us? Well, the population, the people themselves, we can see it, the voters. That's the kind of reverse effect that happened. They're making this mistake for the second time in a row.
But it turns out that right now, so to speak, we're in a period where it's just endless horror for us. In other words, this situation can't be resolved. Trump can't put pressure on Zelensky, and Zelensky can't accept Trump's terms because those terms are unconstitutional. Here's the question. Can Europe intervene and provide some strong security guarantees, take a more assertive stance? Because right now I'm reading the latest news about what Merck said. A ceasefire with the preservation of territories is Europe's position. There should be guarantees from both the US and Europe. A ceasefire is being developed jointly by Ukrainians, Europeans, and Americans. The ceasefire should not negatively affect the unity of NATO and the EU. It should preserve Ukraine's European perspective. If Trump is unable to help Ukraine, in other words, if he is more pro-Russian, can Europe become that support? That is, can Europe provide security guarantees similar to Article 5, deploy troops, or take some strong position? What do you think? Or are we once again left with no way out?
Well, the issue isn't about security guarantees. Europe, let's for a moment set that aside. Just for a second, let's focus on the financial question. I mean, these financial matters, because that's a completely separate discussion. For now, they're definitely not part of the peace plan. In everything else, the issue isn't about Europe or the United States of America. The issue is with the Russian Federation. It was the Russian Federation that unilaterally started the war, pursuing its own goals. Some goals which we also know. The destruction of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. These goals have not been abandoned. And no security guarantees will be able to stop Russia. It's no longer possible to stop Russia with that. That's why the only way to achieve at least a ceasefire, at least to stop the war, not peace, because peace is something more complicated. It's about relationships and so on. But to achieve an end to the war, it's necessary to force Russia to change its own objectives. No security guarantees will make that happen. Only pressure, only suffocating Russia can force Russia to change its goals. There is no other tool. You see, if it were possible to achieve an end to the war through security guarantees or something like that, or through China, the war wouldn't have started in the first place. Russia wouldn't have started it. They wouldn't have begun it.
I agree with you, in essence. The only thing is, now we'll talk about how pressure can be applied. But it seems to me that if our European partners, even without the US, had sent troops into Ukraine or deployed forces along the line of demarcation, then the war would have ended very quickly.
If they had sent them in today, you mean without signing an agreement, of course. Yes, it would have ended.
Well, you see, they can't go for that. I completely agree with that point.
That is exactly what pressure on Russia is. Imagine European troops are now being deployed to Ukraine. This means that Russia will suffer defeat at the front because our troops will be freed up, even if there aren't any along the front line, even if there aren't European troops directly along the front line. But they will be along the border with Belarus, in Odessa, along the border with Moldova. European troops will be stationed there. So everything will be covered except for the front itself. Then our unit stationed there will move forward. And then it's simply the end for Russia. Well, then we'll just drive them out of the occupied territories. Well, that's a fantastic scenario. Of course we want it, but it's just a theory.
Moreover, even then, the missile attacks on Ukraine would stop because if, God forbid, they hit even one soldier, NATO, and that's it. That's a conflict. That's a war with NATO. Let's get back to. I also read today what they did. The European Union imposed sanctions against Russia. Another round. The list includes 5 businessmen connected to Rosneft, Lukoil, 4 shipping companies based in the UAE, Vietnam, and Russia. Then there are a few ships from the Shadow Fleet, just a few, out of several thousand, just a few, and Russian hackers and propagandists, including Diana Panchenko. In total, there are 17 people and 6 organizations on the list. A drop in the ocean, of course. But let's comment on this.
Oh, this isn't the new package. Of course, these are the kind of sanctions that are just routine. When someone is simply added to an existing package, serious things happen when a new sanctions package is introduced. By the way, right now, we aren't hearing any talk about a new sanctions package. All of this is really just details. Right now, Europe is focused on something else. Here we can return to the fact that Europe is currently preoccupied with the issue of financing Ukraine. Without money, it's impossible to continue the war. Exactly. And without money, it will truly be a catastrophe. And we need 60 billion a year specifically for the war, just for the war. Not for the lives of Ukrainians, but for the war. And today, that money isn't there. Last year, it was the Americans who financed this with their financial aid. This year, it was the Europeans who financed it with their loan. Well, a loan that obviously eventually turns into a gift. And for next year, this whole story about using frozen assets is becoming more and more vague, more and more blurred. There's nothing good about it. And this week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, there will be this European summit for 3 days already. It was supposed to be just one day, but 2 extra days were added specifically for this discussion. So right now, of course, the Europeans aren't focused on sanctions. Right now, they need to try to do this before the new year, to develop a mechanism for financing Ukraine for at least the coming year.
You mentioned the frozen Russian assets, and I actually prepared some information on how many countries have spoken out today against transferring these frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Well, as expected, it's Hungary, Slovakia, Belgium, which is also understandable, Italy, Bulgaria, Malta, and the Czech Republic. So 7 European Union countries have come out against it. Mikhail, this is a very important point. Are we correct in understanding that there won't be a new sanctions policy? Trump won't be organizing it, and Congress won't be introducing new sanctions. Europe isn't doing anything for now either. Plus, the frozen Russian assets won't be handed over to Ukraine because 7 countries are against it. So, what is the EU counting on them? Does it mean they're expecting a war that will last 10 years or even longer, and that they will keep providing financial support the whole time to Ukraine? Trump will say, I'm out. You guys have worn me out. What are they counting on? I just want to understand, as they say, from a bird's eye view, a look at this situation. Because
As things stand at this very moment, the problem we are encountering is completely unsolvable, and there are currently no viable methods or strategies available to us that could effectively resolve the situation. As for Congress, whether someone there will make a decision or not, well, Congress has even less time left because the congressional elections are coming up this November.
next year, yes. Yes.
And on the eve of these elections, believe me, those congressmen will really come to life, really come to life. They'll all have to hustle, find ways to get by, prove that they deserve to be reelected, and so on. That's why I have high hopes, serious ones, by the way, for the next political season in America. What's the issue? First, there's Congress. Second, Trump, well, he's an older man, and unlike Putin, he doesn't plan to live to 150. And he understands that if he wants to do something, he has to do it now. Yes, well, let's be honest. In his last year of presidency, he won't accomplish anything. In 2028, he'll already be a lame duck since he doesn't have a second term. So that's it. And the next year, 2026, I believe that's the decisive year. It'll be the year of a great turning point. Because for Trump, truly critical days are coming. Excuse me. Trump, I think you'll agree, is the person of the year, Trump of 1925. When we talked, there was no one we mentioned more often than Trump. And all over the world, all the processes that started, that were set in motion, it's all because of Trump, one way or another. Whether that's for better or worse, doesn't matter right now. What matters is that Trump is shaping the current agenda. And so far, he hasn't succeeded anywhere. Well, yes, he did free 20 hostages in Israel. But for a U.S. president, freeing 20 hostages without really stopping the war, that doesn't really count for much either. Those 20 points don't lead anywhere. No, thank God those 20 hostages were freed. They couldn't have been freed without them. But the fact is, he didn't even really manage to stop that war. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. And on the on the foreign policy front, because what happens inside America is not my business. To discuss it, I don't know, let the Americans judge him or not judge him. And for him, it seems to me, he will now make his last efforts. Trump is going to make his main bet this year. Yes, as they say, he was settling into the Oval Office again, decorating it with gold, renovating it, and so on. And now this year, he will have a decisive battle, and at the same time with the Chinese, about Taiwan, about this Russian Ukrainian war, about a lot of things, really, about a lot of things. And it won't be easy for any of us. And this year is truly a year of decisive change. Putin also doesn't have the strength to keep fighting. That's something we need to understand as well. It's tough for us. We don't have any money, and so on. But Putin is basically entering 2026 with nothing, completely broke. Everyone can see it now. They have absolutely nothing left. They're going to war on motorcycles? Come on, what kind of war is that? We can all see what's happening. So I think this is the year when everything will be decided. 2026. That's when everything will be decided, I can tell you that. It's not like everything is hopeless for us. No, we just need to hold on somehow. I think all of this in the year 26 will be the resolution of this crisis. I don't know in which direction, I don't know who will win or what will happen. But this year will be, like when someone is sick and there's a day when their fever is at its highest. They get sick, their temperature goes up to 37 and 38, and suddenly one day it's 40. And now at this point, they'll either die or survive. But if they survive, then the aftermath will be normal, and that's it. They'll get up and go for a walk. So the year 26 is the year when the whole world will hit 40, so to speak. I'm not just speculating right now.
Mikhail, in conclusion, I want to ask you a question that our audience constantly asks me on my YouTube channel. The question is as follows. Donald Trump created such luxurious conditions for Putin, especially in Alaska, with a grand gesture, to agree and end this war like no one before him. In other words, not Biden. But even then, Putin did not agree. Even when Trump officially and publicly humbled himself before him, a red carpet for a war criminal? Does this mean, as our audiences, for example, are asking, that Putin simply does not want any end to the war or a ceasefire? And the most ideal option for him is Trump, who, as you said, will not be there. In 2 years, his term will be over, and he will no longer have such an opportunity. But the truth is that Putin simply can't, because if he ends the war against Ukraine, his own people will destroy him. He needs to keep fighting. He needs an external enemy. What are your final thoughts?
Yes, but not for that reason. That is, yes, Putin wants to continue the war. Yes, he has no other way out, but not because he would be destroyed by some people. If he wanted a ceasefire, he wouldn't have started shooting. After all, it was he who opened fire. So why would we start shooting? And the thing is, it seems to me, well, here I'm being very subjective, I admit. He understands that in 2028, his presidency will end. And in January 2029, he will retire. Just retire. Play golf. And he knows this about himself. But Putin will never retire. He simply doesn't have that option.
Yes.
And he has no vision of himself in a peaceful Russia. None at all. He is of no use to a Russia that is not at war. That is, for a Russia that is not at war, he is not needed. Putin. Really, it's not even clear what kind of country this is anymore. He destroyed it. He destroyed it. He destroyed science, technology, art there, and by the way, culture too. He destroyed the Russians destroyed it. They no longer have any writers. As for the writers, they condemned them all. They scattered. They don't have. Well, yes, they still have some singers left. Some are left. Singers are all kinds, as they say. But there are no poets left, no writers left, no scientists left. The scientists have scattered. Yeah, that's it. So where are they supposed to go now? There are no journalists left, you see. So what kind of country is Russia, the one that isn't at war for Putin? There's not even such a thing in anyone's mind, not even in their minds, and it won't appear. So under Putin, there's absolutely no chance that we'll see a peaceful Russia. That's why I say that all these conversations, which at best will lead to a ceasefire, not an end to the war. And a ceasefire is something that exists today and is gone tomorrow, just like that. So Putin must be destroyed. Yes, the answer here is simple.
Friends, please like this video, and in the comments, write your thoughts about the situation, the events, the negotiation process, the track, and so on. The well-known political scientist and political technologist, Mikhail Shatterman. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Vasha, goodbye.